Hi, my name is Denisha Jones, and I am the director of the Art of Teaching program at Sarah Lawrence College. I've been a higher education faculty member for the past 18 years, working to prepare teachers in Indiana, Washington, D.C., and now in New York. So, what's going on with all this critical race theory? I want to tell you a little bit about how I'm approaching this with my students this year in my Foundations of Education class. So yesterday I had them first read the bills that have been passed in some of these states or been proposed. Not all of them have been passed. So they looked at Iowa, Utah, Arizona, Ohio, and a couple others. And then we read what is it that they're doing, right? And a lot of these bills are saying what you can't teach, right? You can't teach these critical conversations, these truths, these hard truths that people are having a hard time accepting around race and sex and gender. And then they're also saying what you have to teach, right? You have to teach this patriotic education. Some states say that. And then we went over to the Office of Civil Rights from the Department of Education to look at data on the schools in those states. And so it's a really good tool now that we have a new administration where we're collecting the data again that I use to kind of look at, well, how are students of color, how are Black students faring in these states that are passing these laws? So we go pull up the largest school district in each state. And we look for how are Black students doing? And one way you can tell is by disproportionality. Are they overrepresented or underrepresented in things like college preparation or school suspension and discipline? And in every state that we looked at that has attempted to ban critical race theory, Black students are not doing well in that state. They are either overrepresented in out-of-school suspensions, in-school suspensions, and expulsions, or they're underrepresented in college preparation courses like chemistry and physics, right? Or gifted and talented. So the disparities are there, and we see them in these states in the data that they are forced to report each year. And instead of addressing those disparities, they are banning the one thing that we know really helps students of color do well at school, and that is when we affirm their culture and their identity. And critical race theory, the way they're using it is the umbrella term for things like culturally relevant pedagogy, anti-racist teaching, and anti-racist pedagogy. I then had my students read James Baldwin, A Talk to Teachers, that he gave in 1963. And he ends his talk to teachers by stating that it's a teacher's responsibility to tell Black children that the homes that they live in, the communities that they live in, that it's a criminal intention to keep them as a permanent underclass, pretty much. And so I asked my students, well, if we look at the data on how students are doing in these schools, and we look at the bills that are being introduced, do we have an example here of a continued criminal conspiracy to undermine and hurt Black children? If Black children are not doing well in these states, in these schools, in these districts, what is going after critical race theory going to do to help them? Or maybe they're not trying to help them. Maybe that's what they want to maintain, that Black children continue to not do well in their schools. So I think we should step back and take a look, because we have the data and information to tell us how students are doing in the schools. And what these people are saying is that Black kids are doing bad in the school because Black kids just aren't smart enough. And what we're saying is the school is not meeting the needs of these children because they're not attuning to their culture and their race, and they're not supporting them. And so that's where the arguments lie. And I think it's important that we get out of this, what is critical race theory? It's not being taught in K-12 schools. I write about it in my theoretical frameworks for the papers that I publish, because it is that. It's a theory that I use as a researcher to guide my research, right? But they're not just going after critical race theory. They're going after teaching about meritocracy as a myth, teaching about the structural racism that we know is a big part of our communities and our society. They're saying that what James Baldwin wrote in 1963 doesn't apply today, when we know it does if we look at the works of Jonathan Kozol, who also found the same things in 1990, and even current scholars who are also documenting how we still live in hyper-segregated schools that are underfunded for Black and brown students. And they're trying to dismiss this knowledge and say none of it matters, and that we can't talk about it and we can't address it, and that we can only talk about America as a good place for students. But the data doesn't bear out. So if you're unsure, check and see how are Black students doing in the schools in the states where you're at. And if they're not doing well, then ask yourself, what can we do to ensure that they are doing well? The research is clear that there's a lot we can be doing to support Black students. And that's what the legislation should be focused on. Not on banning critical race theory, not on expecting only love for America and patriotism. That's not helping children do well in school, and that's our job. And to be an anti-racist educator should be something we all aspire to.